we'll transition now to kind of talking about the homework. I know I assigned a ton of reading, or gave the option for a ton of reading. Actually, in writing the email, I realized I spent like 2 hours writing that. I was having so much fun. And I was like, where did the time go? This is all like optional stuff. So we're a bit full tonight with things I want to do to wrap up the class, but there are a few points I want to push into. And so, does anyone have any reflections on the reflections? Do people make some time to read that? Can you say something, Joshi? You look like you were winding up. And for me, it's always really special. It's like almost no matter what anyone says, even if a part of me is like, oh, that's not very profound, actually, when I just feel someone's life and their face towards something, even if it's something that I feel like I'm familiar with, just that someone's facing up to something and meeting it and moving into it and it's moving into them, I just feel so, refreshed, invigorated, appreciative of their eyes and their coming forward. And I always used to feel kind of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and a part of me was a little bit like, well, the Sangha's on the bottom of those. But more and more, the way I feel most penetrated by the teachings happens to be other beings next to me. Maybe we can leave it at that. And I just will offer a thank you to everyone for showing up. And I didn't really give an option not to pass in last week's activity and in that homework. And it takes quite a bit of bravery to come forward, and I'm really grateful. And as for the kind of like homework portion of things, I brought up this dynamic and spiritual practice of the kind of image or sensation or feeling of clarity versus the image, sensation, perception of something that is opaque. And I realize this is not common language you might be using in your kind of everyday life to approach various experiences and sort of currents moving within you. But I'm wondering if anyone had any insights in kind of holding that and looking at your life and kind of wondering about those flows within you. Like, is it just frustrating when you sit down on the cushion and you feel, your world's kind of a mess, or you're contemplating some sort of ethical conundrum in your life and you just want to call it quits because you can't really see a clean way through? Or there could be innumerable ways. I wrote in the email about painting the house. I go over there because it's the north side of the house. Actually, really, Gayla's mostly painting it. I keep saying this again. I'm mostly just instructing or telling her and Doku to do things right now. But it's something new for me, and I'm pretty uncomfortable with the whole process, and so I feel my energy level just like plummet when I try and conceptually imagine what to do next, versus when I get out there and I just look at it. And then it tells me, it says, ooh, why is that spot like not painted? Why is there a hole in that piece of wood? It leads me when I actually touch it and attend to it, versus keeping some kind of distance from it. So I offer all that to sort of prime the flow for everyone. Anyone want to come forward and say anything they noticed in there?
I'd like to share.
Yeah.
I find that this clarity versus this opaqueness, on the cushion, the clarity is readily available in my experience, and it dances in and out of perception throughout my day, depending on what I'm doing. And the area for discovery for me is how to bring that same attendance to all aspects of my life, not just the cushion.
Feeling any movement on that?
When you say, are you feeling any movement, what do you mean?
Where's what have your, maybe, baby steps or into that question revealed for you, if you'd be willing to share?
it's a challenge that's come up for me since sort of accidentally stumbling into spirituality, one that I've really wrestled with, and still one that I feel I continue to wrestle with. I'm not entirely sure.
Maybe a similar current in my life used to unfold quite often after sesshin practice or retreat practice here at the temple or other Zen places. And cultivate in my being some kind of real experience of freedom and simplicity and clarity in living. And then the morning after, we'd all start talking. That's part of the game, is that you're not really socializing with anyone. And I used to feel like some people were like heaping slime over me. And I would then respond with like more slime and being like, ugh, I feel so gross. Like there was something so pure and essential that was being taken care of. And now, this is all just so worthless in some ways. And it was really uncomfortable for a long time. So that's a place I can really resonate with that. I was so visceral, and I had lots of discussions with it. I was like, why are we not only doing this thing? Why are we not only just like abiding in the clarity and locking those gates and telling the kids to go home every time they come in? Or is there some misapprehension of what the point is in my being? Am I just grasping onto feelings of clarity and simplicity? And just rejecting everything that's difficult, and I think there's a lot of that going on in me in that experience.
May I again?
Yeah, go ahead.
That resonates strongly. It's sort of as if there's a stiff arm held out that says, no, not this part, but everything else is okay, just not this part, which sort of fuels it, right? Letting go of the arm is the real challenge.
And I think, for me, where I felt some movement is acknowledging and laughing at and being present with much of the uselessness of discussion or things that I actually do feel might be sort of harmful in one aspect, but also in the touching them, pushing into the places where the connection is super valuable and we do it imperfectly. And where many of us are just struggling and doing the best we can to say hi and be like, hi person, who are you? Like, I want to be seen too. And so how stingy of a heart it's easy for me to wield, being like I'm complete in myself and, keep your business over there kind of feeling. So, and we'll talk about this more tonight, but coming into the place of what does it mean to embrace living beings? What does that call us toward? Well, maybe we can call it there with that conversation, and just do want to highlight that if you are involved in any kind of spiritual practice, really on some level you're probably wrestling with this place of clarity and opaqueness, and it is a kind of a universal drive to be pushing for the clarity over the opaque. And so much of spiritual teachings are really encouraging us not to do that, to really take on the fullness of life. But again and again, we'll have glimpses and experiences of some kind of great flow, and then we will grasp onto that in a second, think we've got it, think we've figured it out, and start cutting away things that don't feel like they're a part of that. And so just to offer that's probably in there somewhere, lurking or moving in many, many ways. So something to really pay attention to. And then as for the many other readings I sent to everyone, does anyone want to make a plug for one that they read that they really enjoyed? Just kind of like, hey, if you have 10, 15 minutes, you should read this one. It was really cool. Here's why.
I read it was the article from The Lion's Roar that you sent. And I think, it's tangential to what we were just talking about, the clarity and opaqueness, but that the clarity sometimes is like an effort to, or a process of cutting through or wiping out the opaqueness, seeing through it. And the thing that I've found, especially in my practice lately, is that it's so important to bring that clarity to the opaqueness, to just look at it. Because that's where I live, that's where I exist, that's where I interact, that's where everything is going on. And without the opaqueness, the clarity doesn't really do anything. I don't know.
Did anyone else read that by Genjo Earthland Manuel? I was also going to give a plug for that one.
That was...
it actually seemed like she read the section of Heejin Kim's book that I read last class, and then wrote something a little bit easier to digest about that exact kind of conversation or dialectic between wisdom and delusion. I actually want to share a quote from it. She says, "If your inability to cut off ceaseless thought has ever left you feeling hopeless or inadequate, you're not alone. Anyone who has practiced earnestly for any length of time has likely wrestled with the thinking mind, motivated by a desire to evolve away from delusion and toward awakening or enlightenment. We may wonder what we're missing, always searching for the secret code we believe will unlock the door to enlightenment. We read endless Dharma books, which might lead us to that door, but ultimately leave us standing outside, desperate to get in. Perhaps we even take our deluded selves to a Buddhist teacher or center to receive guidance, hoping to fix whatever it is that prevents us from seeing the light. But what if our deluded minds aren't a barrier to enlightenment at all? What if they're the very path to it?" Yeah, it's so sweet.
Right.
So encouraging that you have the material you need. It's there, and what a radical thing to do with our heart minds to just attend to the mess as it is. Just see it. Just tell yourself, tell the person in front of you, you see them, and forget the solutioning mind. Even though that will, might come up into it. It might be important to make a plan here or there, but what's the leading edge of our intention? So recommend it. It's not that long of a read compared to lots of the other things I sent. Anyone else? Maybe one more reading that people got to? If one more got to. Okay. Well, that's good. We have lots of things to do tonight, so no worries there. So I wanted to start out with a review. Always when we get to the class 6, we're just like, what did we even talk about? What was accomplished at all? Was there anything? And actually, it seems like there was. And I mean, it's the hope of every teacher and I guess willing student that within these classes we've been attending to, that something continues forward in our life that's meaningful and impactful and shapes our eyes as we move through the world. And so this review, I'm hoping, is not just for the sake of review as review, but review as hopefully we can explore and distill a few nuggets of the material we've been covering in a way that we can package it up and really take it with us, and hopefully in a way that it'll continue to work on us and we can continue to work on it. So I'd actually recommend people, if you have something to write with right now, it'll be good to take quick notes, and also it'll be helpful to you in the activity we will do after this. Aaron, could you go into the office, and on your left there will be a jar of green pencils. At the very front right next to the printer there will be a bunch of paper. If you could grab both of those and bring them, that would be wonderful. Thank you. While we have a second, there's a quick question I've been meaning to ask everyone in my life. Does anyone know secret cures to poison oak? Poison oak rashes?
Ooh.
And I asked for two reasons. One, because I want to know what it actually is, because I've been suffering. And two, it seems like everyone has these mysterious remedies that only work for them. So, curious what people have to offer and throw into the pot.
Yes, every year.
Mm-hmm.
If I sit next to somebody that's thinking about poison, I get seriously. The only thing that's ever worked for me is steroidal cream. My doctor prescribes it, and the steroid, it takes the itch out.
Yeah. So maybe if folks could raise their hand, Erin looks like she's going to give these things to people. Yeah, now is the time. Thanks. Yeah, I'm basically bathing in that stuff right now. Yeah.
The cream, the 1%?
It's not, I guess it's not prescription grade.
Right.
I went today and got some heavier drugs.
Epsom salts now.
Really?
Gives you relief.
Oh.
Epsom salt and oatmeal together.
Yes.
Throw a bunch of
Thank you.
boil some oats, and it just it just soothes it. Doesn't make it go away.
Ah.
But you know about Technu also.
Mm-mm.
So Technu is the miracle cure for poison oak.
Yeah.
No
You
one's
can put
mentioned
it
this
on
one.
if you've seen it and you know you've been in it. You can put the Technu on and you won't get it. You can put it on before you go out, prevent it from getting it, and you can also, once you see the rash, you can put it on, and it will really shorten the spread of it.
It does a great job removing the oils and preventing them from sticking to begin with. So, yeah.
I always have it with me everywhere I go. So Technique,
Great.
and been in the Cordell.
Thank you.
Change your clothes and your sheets off.
Yeah, definitely change anything.
Like anything that oil is going to transfer back. Like if you have it on your arm, wear a long sleeve shirt because it's going to go to your side.
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
Definitely happens.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for your wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay, so review. I sort of came down to 4 different ways we've been talking about and thinking about, or I presented the 6 perfections. The first is sort of the basic, foremost, these are nodes of awakening in one sense, that each of them is a gateway to an awakened life, that their bases of training could be another way to think about it, that if one is going to unfold awakened living, to cultivate a life that's based on vow and awakening rather than perpetuating karma and sort of base reactions of self-protection and caught in ignorance and self and other, basically karmically entrenched life, that these 6 perfections will be sort of the gates, the terrain, the places you'll have to cultivate in order to be doing that. And so it can be really powerful to reflect in a simple way. I mean, it's sort of, this is like the very basic kind of teaching about these perfections, but just to cultivate a reflection and a mind that reflects often, where am I flowing in relation to these different perfections? Where am I caught? And perhaps where am I putting a toe in now and again? And how is that interesting? And so in Milo's example there, in meditation, how do I feel like I'm really flowing in something? And then it's interesting when I walk up and move around in the world, it feels like something completely dries up. What's going on there? How can I make those maybe feel more harmonious? Where am I sort of maybe cheating on the cushion in some ways and going off into bliss land? And then the world calls me on that. Or, I mean, there can be innumerable permutations with this, but the ways they play with each other and just having simple reflection to see where's flowing, where's not. And to know these six different nodes sort of pretty clearly and pretty fully. And second, I called this one dynamic interplay, so that these awakened qualities of mind, they interact with each other in significant and interesting ways. And in one sense, we can say they are involved in revealing each other. And so there are 2 ways we talked about that, and I think these are kind of classic ways, that the sets of 2, so generosity and morality, forbearance and vigor, and reflection and wisdom. Each sets of those pairs they really need each other to kind of reveal a certain kind of fullness of their movement. And actually for funsies, I wrote down kind of how I would also characterize what those gates are, what that kind of movement is, the kind of discovery. And if this can be just very opaque, I'm not going to elaborate on this. Speaking of opacity. So generosity and morality, I wrote inside and outside. It's an exploration of what's in and what's out. And forbearance and vigor, stillness and movement. And reflection and wisdom. What is body and what is not body? My body, to be clear. Or what is self and what is no self? And the image I have of them is that they're sharpening each other to find something that's right in the middle of those dichotomies. It's not caught by either of those. In fact, maybe you could say its left and right leg is made of those when we get a perception of one of them. But there's something about this. Many of you will have heard the term the thusness of the Tathagata, the self-confidence of a Buddha, something so thus and present and leveling and connected and also separate moment by moment, completely alive, that each of these kind of sharpened up against each other are pointing directly to that. And so that can be a place we explore. And also the sets of three. So the first three, generosity, morality, and forbearance. And the second three, zeal, reflection, and wisdom. And that classically these were sort of separated into two groups. And the first three is what people who are not monastics could practice. That was the kind of terrain of their spiritual growth and cultivating goodness in life. And that traditionally in the Buddha's time, that the Sangha of the monastics were cultivating the other three, that their practice moved into that. And as I've talked about kind of in earlier classes, like in the foundational teachings classes, we're in a weird time that we've pretty much lumped these wisdom practices in with all the other classical practices of the Buddha's full Sangha. So for example, many people here make donations of money to the temple and also come to full 7-day long meditation retreats. Whereas historically, it was one group's job to make offerings to the monastics. It was people they were encouraged to give gifts so that the monks could do their wisdom practices. And the monks, they couldn't work. The whole point was that they are centering their whole life and all of their energies on the cultivation of these last three paramitas. So it's interesting. We're trying to bite off a lot here, and I count myself in that because I'm not a renunciate. So I can have a family. The head teacher here at Ejo, right? He had a family and taught school and was a priest for many, many years.
Do you think that that's somehow like a widening of the Bodhisattva path?
Yes, I do. Yeah, that was definitely.
Okay.
And that idea of a bodhisattva really emerged later when the breakdown of that happened, and it gave sort of a simple narrative that there was sort of a widening of Buddhism and it was moving to different places, and there became sort of apparent that there was kind of a frailty in lots of the rules. It wasn't sort of designed to shift to different cultures, say for example where it was very cold and people needed to live in monasteries the whole time. You couldn't really be a wandering ascetic in Tibet, for example. Sure. It doesn't really work. So that's one simple way. But yes, so widening of the Bodhisattva vow.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so within the cultivation of these different nodes of awakening, we find that these different kind of energetic flows will happen between these kind of particular sets. And really in there, that maybe in an image I get, that is the cultivation of these paramitas. It's an important way just to realize how they're playing off each other and revealing each other. And so something we can do in our own practice is if we're wondering, say for example, man, my energy is really low. I just can't harness any kind of umph for living. And if we kind of throw ourselves at it again and again, we might sort of ask, oh, how about what if I look at this paramita of tolerance, of patience, of forbearance? Is there something I'm leaving out? And I've given this example before, but for me, that's often I'm leaving out where I'm frustrated. I leave out where I'm actually like angry about a certain situation or shape, and I sort of go to sleep because I sort of cut off a piece of my being, rather than being like, yeah, I'm kind of angry about that, I'm frustrated, and it sort of reconnects me with an energetic root. Or if you're feeling, you're sort of walking around and kind of being an idiot, you know, I don't know if you feel yourself doing that now and again, but I realize when I'm doing that, almost always, I'm not making any space for reflection. And I say reflection just really broadly. I think actually I get caught pretty easily by thinking, oh, I need to do the sitting meditation thing. But even just saying, I'm gonna make space to go for a walk. I'm gonna lay on the floor and have no objectives. These kinds of things tend to reconnect us with a kind of fullness of life that we can lose sight of really easily, and I can start living in a to-do list, for example. So knowing these different connections and sort of exploring them can be really helpful, or is, I guess, vital actually, in terms of cultivation of path. The third point, and way we've been talking about them, is sort of different degrees or level of exploration and depth, or maybe just even facets. I don't know if I like depth so much. But these come from the 16 Bodhisattva precepts, or at least I get this idea from the 16 Bodhisattva precepts. So everyone who's wearing a raksu, the smallest version of a robe in our school, robe to go, as we might affectionately say, folks have taken the 16 Bodhisattva precepts as a way that they've said, I want to live by path, and by living by path, I'm going to observe this ethical code. And so those begin with the 3 refuges. I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then the 3 pure precepts. What are they? Embracing codes and forms, which basically means I'm taking on these codes and forms, I'm actually going to do them. I'm going to say, yes, I'm signing up for this. And the second one is embracing good dharmas. So cultivating harmony and wholeness and the good feels, cultivating the good feels of all the negative prohibitory precepts, for example, and embracing living beings. And so for me, I translate that as entering into the muck of life, entering into the fact that lots of situations will be opaque, have good and bad, and to put ourselves into them and receive that feedback. And so these, I think we can, this maps really well onto thinking about each of the paramitas. So for example, let's talk about generosity. The first just do it approach is be giving, and do it with your intention and your mind. And I think one of the most important parts about that, it's really not asking you to do it well even, it's just do it. Have an image of what that can look like and just do it. And what happens then? You get feedback, right? You get a feeling of nailed it, or you get a feeling of ooh, really missed the mark. Thought I was being helpful in that situation, I wasn't. Thought I was being really generous and giving, but actually I realized it was just needy and dependent of me. And this was more for me than it was for another person, right? So this first layer is just so important that if we don't throw ourselves in and make an effort, then we're not going to get the traction for refining our hearts and refining our intention. And that second level is then to cultivate goodness through those. So start to tune into what is harmonious giving. So are there times when you have an opportunity to make a beautiful gift, but you realize that, I don't know, maybe someone's got a crush on you and you don't want to foster that crush, so you skillfully say, maybe I'm not going to give this person a chocolate bar today, because it's going to send the wrong message. Like these are all things we're very aware of, but how do I become more and more sensitive to a harmony and not just simple feelings of giving? And lastly, not shying away from the complexity of life. and receiving all the nitty-gritty suffering and joy therein. It's hard. I don't have much else to say about that. That one, I just think, the nitty-gritty joy and suffering of human life. And that comes as, a being that flows through you, all of our karmic tendrils and thoughts that are moving through us all the time, and in meeting living beings, and actually how those two aren't separate all the time. The last way we've been talking about this is that prajna and wisdom as the animating force of the other five. And really this is a place where almost all of the classical teachings center. And this wisdom, this prajna, the embodiment of the teachings of emptiness, of no self, and impermanence. And so what is that? And the way I shorthand wrote it is the realization of profound change and interbeing moment by moment. And when we actually perceive that in one way, that has nothing to do with my intention or non-intention. That's actually the bedrock of life, that I'm interbeing all the time. That's the only way I actually can be in life. And things tend to go wonky when I just center on one side of that. And things tend to harmonize in a different kind of way when I take up that center with intention and I perceive that I want to move from that place. You gonna say something?
Could you just say that again, that sentence?
Yeah, maybe. The one I read from the paper?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Realization of profound change and interbeing moment by moment. So that's the embodiment of the teachings of emptiness. And that when we realize that, when we perceive it as not just something I do with my intention, right? I don't do emptiness. I don't do no self. In one sense, there might be a perception of that. But really the teachings of Buddhism point to a bedrock, that the fact that that is the base of our life, the base of our living, is this kind of radical interpenetration that I don't have control over of. But what you do have control over of is working to move from that, to be from that, to choose that place of mutuality as your place of response. And so here, I would say that it's important to, and I think my words are pointing at this, but it's easy to think oftentimes that I will become the no self, that I will become emptiness in a way. But the teachings, I think, are pointing more towards I become aware and sensitive to selfing moment by moment. That the Buddha actually, he never said that there was a thing called no self, but that there was a complete freedom and movement of selfing, moment by moment by moment by moment. And that's how we live life. And when you become aware of that, you get some ability to move and birth a harmonious self at that time. The skillful selves, we would say in technical Buddhist language. And so, moment by moment, new self, awake, responding, fresh. And I think that can even happen when you're sleeping in Zazen. just a caveat there. That, I offer that. We can leave that opaque. That we can have a sense of watching even when we feel like we're quote unquote not doing it well. A sense of just watching things play out and interacting with the deep complexity of life. That this is a place of profound freedom compared to arguing with that, right? Wrestling with it, wishing for a clear image, a clear way through, forcing an image of what it would be to be a wise person onto our mess of a self, right? So just being with it in the play is so, so important. And in fact, it's very sweet. Ejo, he says when someone's been coming to sit for a while and then they go through a sleepy phase, he said that's really important. Really important to just have a while where you just cannot stay awake no matter what. So I offer that as a gift if that is a thing in your life. So once again, what do we have there? We have the nodes of awakening mind, kind of interplay between these nodes and the dynamics and energetic flows between them. These different levels of depth and exploration that are possible to explore. And lastly, wisdom being the vital force that they're all about. All hands of wisdom, we could say. Yeah, any other questions therein? Reflections? Okay, well, I think we'll transition to the activity that I want to offer tonight. And so, surprise, it's going to be a sharing activity. I've been reflecting that COVID's frustrating on many levels, and one of them is your toolbox for teaching a class is just like totally stripped out. So original ideas of like hanging signs in the class, and one section would be wisdom and one would be generosity, and you could go and like talk about that in that group and it'd be lively. But currently, perhaps for not much longer, these are the constraints we have. So thank you for bearing with me. So, I went to mark these 6 weeks we've had together, and then for many of us, 5 months together, and we're moving into summer, and kind of wondering how we'll carry this energy forward. What can we do? What can we not do in order to help cultivate this thing we've been chewing on, whatever that is for you. And so for the activity, I would just like to consider this thought and then come up with something maybe, let's say 2 sentences max about out of these classes, readings, and discussion, what stands out or calls to the deepening of your understanding, and how will you attend to that? It's an interesting wording. It's kind of funny, but I think it leaves a lot of tendrils for exploration and interpretation, which I think is fun. So out of these classes, readings, and discussion, what stands out or calls to the deepening of your understanding, and how will you attend to that? What stands out, calls to the deepening of your understanding, and how will you attend to that? And so you can take that on any time frame you like. You can take that with any degree of specificity or poetic flow as you like. But I always find that my putting out a small vow or a small intention to another group of people can be really helpful for me in kind of keeping to that and keeping it alive. So I think we'll take 4 minutes and see if people are finished around then. And I also want to note that you're welcome to pass if you'd like, and to give that option to people. What calls to the deepening of your understanding, and how will you attend to it? maybe just another minute to finish up. Okay. So we'll share really in the same form that we did last class. We'll take on how we share, and we'll say what we have to offer without too much kind of preamble or anything beforehand, and just let it sink into the space a bit. And then you can you bow when you're finished, let's say, and the next person can wait a moment or two, kind of whatever feels appropriate, and then start reading. And we'll go through everyone here in the room, and we'll go in a circular order, clockwise order, and if you would like to pass, you're welcome just to make a bow at your seat. And then the next person can see that and move on. And then we'll have Joichi go last for people in the hall, and then we'll have Rinsho. You can go after Joichi, and Emma after Rinsho. Okay. So maybe we'll wait until someone feels comfortable to jump in, and we'll seal everyone's fate.
Try to see what is here, and then give a gift.
From Master Dogen, to receive is to transmit, and to transmit is to awaken. And then a continuous cyclic engagement.
Balance is revealed in dichotomy. I vow to embrace myself in each moment.
The interplay between patience and vigor, and vow to myself to go on a backpacking adventure, just do a solo trip that I haven't done before, really, just to be able to sit with that.
The idea of multiple selves and the need not to clearly define myself or my relationships with other people. And sort of holding this time once a week. On Tuesdays, even without the Sangha, I think will be my focus.
Family sorrow, so hard to bear, calls to be held in compassion and with presence, not wishing for change. I must face it, hold it, and let it speak.
when facing the struggle for clarity, I wish to pay attention to where I'm disconnecting in my life, that I should feel that need to continue to fuel that struggle.
Recently, I've had great success and joy in being wrong, taking a leap and just being wrong. And I hope to have the courage to continue.
What am I looking for? I take refuge in honesty.
What calls to me is exploring what is inside, what is outside, and trying to shift the sense of that boundary.
The path ahead is opaque. I will do body first, guided by the six perfections like a babe in water-stained map.
Emma, would you be willing to say that again a little bit more slowly? I think it was hard to
Yeah. And bring it close to my face. The path ahead is opaque. I will do body first, guided by the six perfections like a babe in water-stained map.
Maybe we can all bow together. It's such a joy. I'd like to close class with talking about a few other ways I'd offer about possibilities of carrying practice forward, this idea of the six perfections, or broader Buddhist practice in a sense. And the first thing I want to offer was the idea of study to everyone. What is study? What does that look like? And I wanted to put forward the idea of the difference between gathering information and an orienting in practice. I know that I tend to often shut my heart down when I get in the modality of gathering information. Maybe many of you are skilled at that and really love that. You can teach me sometime. But I think it's really important to sort of delineate those energies and find where it's like, oh, okay, I just want more general learning about this. I remember feeling ashamed that I had very little understanding of the broader flows of Buddhism, even though I was a monk. I sort of just got jazzed about what I got jazzed about. And so then for a long time, I was like, oh, I need to round myself out in some way. And I sort of stopped being engaged with different offerings and sutras and teachings. And so practice orientation, thinking about picking up a text, of which there are many, and entering into it in a way that allows it to be opaque. Coming back to that. So I'm glad I set that up in the beginning. Allows something that can be opaque for you and not just be I would maybe point people here a little bit more towards a reading that's difficult, not sort of very pre-digested Buddhist books in a sense. I think those are great and those have their place. But I think inviting everyone into a place where you can encounter these teachings that are not easy, and that not easiness of them is also kind of indicative of how much they might be worth in one sense, how much they're radically different from the usual ways we approach our day-to-day life or know our eyes, right? They're revealing something very different. And so there are many, many books if you wanted to study the Prajnaparamita teachings in more detail. Probably I'll start maybe from the most accessible outward. There's a beautiful book by Red Pine here on the Heart Sutra. So you might have forgotten that every Sunday we chant the Heart Sutra in English. Avalokiteshvara, when deeply practicing Prajnaparamita. Clearly, it's fun. In English we say clearly saw, but actually in Chinese it's much more ambiguous. It could be clearly seeing, clearly sees, that all 5 aggregates, all the things that make up a human life or anything, are empty, and thus relieved all suffering. So that whole teaching right there, that's quite short, quite condensed, is one of the shortest versions of the Prajnaparamita literature that we have. So to take up that text in a practice orientation, you can read it daily, you can read so many commentaries about it, and there are lots of books that just do that. So here's one by Red Pine, a really important translator. There's another by Thich Nhat Hanh. So I know many people have an affinity with this man's teachings. It's called The Heart of Understanding, Commentaries on the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra. Really excellent. I mean, it's any time you have the opportunity to receive Thich Nhat Hanh's heart and eyes is just, delightful. And the other books I wanted to offer, so the Diamond Sutra, many people will have heard of this, I've mentioned it before, begins with the Buddha just living his life in India and a student coming forward and asking him a question of, how do we practice? How do we become like you? You're so good, you're so put together. How do we do this? And the Buddha gives an important answer, which was written down and expounded upon at length. And there are many commentaries about that, and many different ways that it'll mess with and open up your seeing and understanding. So again, here, the Diamond Sutra by Red Pine, he actually came out with a really small pocket version of a new translation, which I really recommend. I think it's just an $8 book. It's nice because you can just put it in a bag you have and be reading through it. Remember, it really struck me when I pulled up to pick up Edjo after he dropped off his car to have the tires changed or something, and he was just sitting there on a street corner, reading the Diamond Sutra. Just totally like here, present with it. And then he saw me, into the bag, got in the car. That's possible. You can bathe your eyes in these teachings and it'll totally do something. It's hard to talk about, but to decide to come back to these things which are difficult and not readily revealing their secrets, it can become quite fun and exciting to toss yourself against that kind of wall, and then eventually you just pop right through it at some point. It's quite wonderful. The other one I'd recommend for people maybe a little more philosophically inclined would be the Prajnaparamita, the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines. So this is basically, it feels like a bunch of people just got together and said, how can we tease out this question of emptiness in every single possible way? And it's kind of ridiculous at some points, but also amazingly illuminating in terms of kind of mythological happenings here. So for example, there's a being in there who's basically the most beautiful of all gods. So wonderful, so good, so thirsting after the truth. But his kind of place is he's still attached to his goodness a little bit. That's kind of his thing. And there's a point, he sort of keeps getting one-upped by all these monks who even have one thought of the profound connectivity and emptiness of things. So there are these ways, that's one example of the way this kind of mythological unfolding of dialogue, and there's a great scene here in the end where someone who's thirsting to meet his teacher and unfold wisdom in all its fullness, he wants to sprinkle the ground with water, but Mara has come and hidden all of the water in the universe. And so he says, well, I will cut off my life here and I will pour my blood on the ground. And in that way, I will have given something to honor this teacher. So it's really intense, fun, but we can switch lenses to mythological language. And actually, I think that's a teaching about meditation right there. It says, and swords entered him from all sides, is how that's phrased. And I think, for me, I sometimes have the feeling that happens when I sit down in meditation. All of my ability to do something is completely cut off. My ego that thinks I can run around and tweak this knob, tweak that knob, attend to this task and do this, thinks I can, get everything in the right shape. When I sit down and face the wall, all of that breaks. And I often have the visceral sense that a part of me dies. Like, it just can't continue on because it has none of its usual tools, right? The moistness is all gone. And so actually, if I hang out with the tumbling of my mind and its inability to do things for long enough, there's water in the universe again, except it's my blood. It's my psychic blood that actually has total vibrancy within it. So maybe that resonated with some of you. Perhaps it turned a lot of you off to meditation. I'm sorry if that's the case. But for me, that's very exciting because often how frail and foolish I feel when I sit down on a meditation cushion. But these stories can tease out something that I would say very few other kinds of conceptual understandings can. Right. So this is one way we can carry the teachings forward. It's not the only way. But a really potent way that I'd sort of highlight if you have that inclination. And the other way, well, it's twofold. One is to cultivate solitude and to reflect. So that can have many shapes and forms. I don't think I'll say much about that. But the flip side of that, I would also say to cultivate relationships which see, question, and wonder about the perfections. So for example, do you have friendships where you can go up and talk to someone and be like, man, I'm just not feeling energetic these days. Like, what's going on? What gives you energy? How are you doing with the flow? Like, maybe, I don't know, are you trying some diet that makes you feel energetic and vibrant? Oh, how's that going? And how does that make it so I can meet the world better? So these don't just have to be your secret pocket of Buddhist friends that you have, but what are relationships where you can pour yourself in and feel questioning around these nodes of awakening and move towards those and cultivate them. And then you can be brave and create a secret pocket of Buddhist friends. That's a thing you can do. You have the opportunity for that. And so you can ask someone in this room to get tea. You can linger on a Sunday. And I know it's awkward. Linger is definitely the right word for it sometimes. But linger and meet people, and you can open up conversations about this. And I think actually many people are hungry for this kind of conversation and this kind of friendship that's really based in maybe not just what's your personality and what do you do, but it's like, oh, are you curious about the talk today? What struck you? What didn't? And yeah, that's an option. And you can also have practice discussions with Genjo. That's a thing. There's a sign up out here. If you have more questions, you can talk to me about that. And you could also just come weed in the garden on Thursday nights or Saturday mornings. There are groups going, and it's really fun to kind of walk by a group of people weeding and talking about the Sunday Dharma talk, or talking about an upcoming ceremony. Like, what is that about? What's happening with that? And this, I think, it's easy, I think, to highlight just the cultivate solitude and reflection part of Buddhist practice. And I think actually many people who are inclined towards Zen tend to lean that way. It's easy to just kind of be like, okay, that's the place where the real action happens. But I think it's equally important and profound to make community around these ideas, and then it becomes so much easier for you to put them at the center, especially when other eyes are equally seeing them as valid and important. And again, it doesn't have to be secret Buddhist friends, can be real Buddhist friends too. So that's all fair game. It's all fair game. So lastly, maybe kind of nuts and bolts of closing in the last few minutes. Always like to mention the possibility of making dana to the temple at the beginning and end of class. So dana, first paramita, generosity, that these classes are given free of charge, and your donation of money or if you don't have a lot of money, you can come here and read equally too, or volunteer in any way you can. But pouring yourself into the temple in a way of giving back and also deepening your engagement is so necessary to the lifeblood of a temple. And it supports my life. I can live here in full time and spend time cultivating these classes, and then it's beautiful. Ejo's idea for this temple and space, and I won't say it's just Ejo's, it's a community vision we've cultivated, is that one way for a temple or a Buddhist institution to go is get really big, right? Have like 10 monks in here practicing all the time, in a full community, and we need a bigger hall. And another way is to cultivate monks and then have them leave and go places and start communities. And there's a very good chance that will be my life. And so in terms of your pouring into this place in whatever capacity you will, that really pours into my life. And on that note, I'm just really humbled to be here and have, some ability and entrustment from my teacher and everyone's buy-in to be here in these classes. It's incredibly important for my own journey and heart, and I've learned lots in these how long? 5 months of teaching. It's my first time sort of teaching full series. So thank you. Last few things. If you need something, or I would even say if you want something, you can bug me. So send the temple an email. If you have my personal email, you can email that too. And one thing you get really good about when you live at a temple is boundaries. So if I can't help you or don't have the time, I will just tell you I can't. So feel free to reach out if you just want to learn something or have a conversation. I'd really enjoy that. The other thing is next Tuesday, I'd like to have a potluck here. This is going to be what we call a self-potluck. We are still in COVID times, and life's weird. So the game is bring your own dinner and we will eat near each other and we will talk. Right? Isn't it foolproof? What a great plan.
Can you just look at everyone else and, that looks really good.
Yeah, exactly. So bring your A game, or you can be humble and just bring like oatmeal or what have you. Or some strawberries if you want to be decadent. So whatever, I'd really like to do that, and we'll just, this tent will still be up actually, and we can listen to the Maroomba band. Oh man, I'm gonna find out where the Maroomba band is, and maybe we'll see if they want to come play here. That would be incredible. Okay, so bracket that.
I wonder that every week. Do you know who they are? Which neighbor is?
Joichi, do you have an idea?
Chris is part of it.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right, we have a way in. Okay, note on that, and I will send out an email if anything changes about that, or I'll just send out an email anyway, but sort of same time, same place kind of gig. So lastly, I wanted to end with the very beginning. It's called a preliminary admonition of the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines. Call forth as much as you can of love, of respect, and of faith. Remove the obstructing defilements and clear away all your taints. Listen to the perfect wisdom of the gentle Buddhas, taught for the weal of the world, for heroic spirits intended. And you can be such a hero because in the end, it's not for you, but it's also for you.